Hey everybody, this is Blake here. I am not feeling very well today, so I'm going to make this video as short as possible. But I am going to be talking about Krampus, which I was really looking forward to, at least for a while. When I saw that in the main trailer, I had never even heard of this project, so I immediately fell in love with it. I thought everything about it looked amazing. I loved how the preview kind of subverts our expectations. It starts off like it's going to be a wholesome family Christmas drama, and then adds kind of a raunchier side, making you think it's going to be one of those comedies like that new Seth Rogen one. I don't know why I keep doing that. Um, or and then suddenly it becomes a horror movie, and the idea of Santa's evil counterpart terrorizing people, and actually getting a decent sized budget, just it warms my heart and it fills me with Christmas cheer. But then I heard that it was PG-13, and that just sort of deflated my enthusiasm. I don't think that horror films need to be PG-13, but this one seemed like it was designed to be a rated R movie. But I kept reminding myself that there were other non-R horror flicks that have become classics over the years. Tremors, Poltergeist, Gremlins. And so it's possible that Krampus could have ended up being a good movie, but it just came down to, was it sanitized in post-production, or was this the plan from the beginning? That always makes the difference. You can make a really good horror film with a PG-13 rating if that's how you designed all the scares, but if you designed it as a rated R film and the violence was cut out, that just kind of declaws the movie and it loses most of its impact. But now that I've seen Krampus, I really liked it. It was good. It was fun. I do suspect that they were preparing for a PG-13 rating, at least during production. The only time I was really distracted by it was when a character teased us with the F-bomb. They do say fuck once, and it was a really good use of the word. But then there are other times when they'll say things like mother fricker or cluster F, and it's just kind of, it draws too much attention to the PG-13 rating. If you're not going to actually have the characters say the word, then just don't even come close to saying it. Just say something else completely different. But otherwise, I'm actually glad that this film wasn't gorier, because I think it would have made the movie too mean-spirited. It's a horror comedy, and yeah, like Evil Dead 2, Dead Alive, those films also had, significant amount of gore, but when you're dealing with kids in peril, you gotta be careful. And so I was perfectly content with the amount of violence, because this film is still pretty edgy, and make no mistake, if you think the kids are safe, then you've got another thing coming. There's some twisted stuff that occurs in this movie, but it totally fits this warped, morbid fairy tale that, Krampus is trying to be. I can't say that Krampus is a great movie. Even though it's pretty funny, I think it still could have been funnier. I don't think I'm going to be quoting any of the lines here, or if any of the comedy really is going to stay with me over the years, in contrast to Tremors, which still has lines and situations that crack me up whenever I think about them, and I remember them very clearly. It could have been scarier, even though it is still pretty frightening. There's a portion in like the middle block where it seemed like it started getting a little repetitive. There's this great attack in the attic, and that's where like all the demonic gift-themed monsters show up, and it's a good scene. And then they take that attack downstairs into the I guess it would be the dining room or the living room, whatever. And it just pretty much uses the exact same jump scares. So either they were running out of money, or they just had run out of ideas. It's only for like a couple of minutes, which might seem petty to bring up on my part, but considering this entire attack is maybe 10-15 minutes, and there reaches a point where it starts coasting at what I say amount for like 5 minutes of that. It's still a third or a fourth of that time, so it did kind of get a little mundane for just a little bit. Otherwise, I thought this film was very fast-paced. It doesn't take long to get going, but it's not really in a hurry either. I thought the monster effects looked great. I loved that they used like old school puppetry in order to bring these monsters to life, and the designs are incredibly twisted and disturbing. You get a taste of that in the previews. My favorite was the Jack-in-the-Box monster. I thought that was going to be an awesome effect, and it ended up being a lot scarier than I thought it would be. But they still also use it for comedy, and somehow they didn't really screw with the tone. I mean, the funny parts made me laugh, and the scary parts, made me cringe. But at the same time, I didn't feel like one side was really harming the other. I also really liked the teddy bear, which I presume is a reference to demonic toys, or hopefully it's not a reference to Puppet Master versus demonic toys. God damn it, I got that franchise in my mind again. I must get it out. Okay, enough of that. Where was I? Sorry, the Puppet Master stress disorder has sometimes just gets to me. Oh yeah, I thought the Krampus looked awesome. He looks terrifying, and I think when they first introduce him, yeah, he's pretty fucking scary, and it's just a very well directed scene. And then when you finally see him in all of his glory, it's impressive, but at the same time, his appearance is strange enough to where you can kind of laugh at it while also being kind of afraid of it. And once again, it's a perfect balance that totally worked on me. A lot of people have complained that he wasn't used enough. I was perfectly fine with how he was used. It made more sense to kind of keep him in the background and focus more on the gift-themed monsters and to a lesser extent the elves. Because if he got involved in the action more, I think he would have become a generic slasher villain. And furthermore, if you really look at the effect, there's a lot of complicated stuff going on in terms of the puppetry and all the various appendages they add to him. And even though I think it's a guy in a suit, they add so much that it would probably make him it would make it very difficult for him to move. So I didn't mind that. A lot of people did. I thought the gift-themed monsters were cool enough to where they were able to carry the rest of the film. I thought the elves were a little disappointing just because they're just dudes in masks, and they're kind of cool-looking masks, and I didn't really have a problem with them. It's just that they seem like a step down from the gift-themed monsters. Because the elves dominate like the last act of the movie. By then, the gift-themed monsters are either taken out of the picture or they're just not playing as big of a role. I also didn't really like the gingerbread men. For one, they weren't voiced by Gary Busey. I hope that's not a reference, that this movie wasn't referencing Ginger Dead Man, but I will reference Ginger Dead Man for them. God damn it, I mentioned another shitty movie, and now I just totally lost my train of thought. It's just that they're brought to life using CGI. And the CGI isn't bad, it just feels kind of out of place compared to the other monsters, the practical effects. And they were maybe a little bit too comical, but still, the part where they're firing a nail gun into some dude's leg, that's pretty brutal. And like I said, this film is surprisingly edgy for the PG-13 rating. I also liked how, even though it balances horror and comedy very well, there is a significant amount of human drama on display. Like, at first, you don't really like the characters, they're just kind of jerks. But then, as the film progresses, you start learning more about them based on how they react to the situation. And the way they start redeeming themselves really made me care for them. And I liked how whenever somebody died, they felt it. It wasn't just like, oh, no big deal. No, you really felt that emotion. And once again, it just kind of heightened the tension because I care for these characters. And I thought the actors did a great job at balancing fear, drama, and comedic timing. So I thought the performances were very good. I loved the color scheme of this movie, like a lot of Christmas themed colors, green, red, white. The director had previously done Trick or Treat, and one of the really exceptional aspects of that movie was how it just drowns in Halloween atmosphere. You get all of the imagery that accompanies the holiday. And it does the same thing, or Krampus does the same thing, where it's really having a lot of fun with the Christmas imagery and basing its atmosphere and style around that. So it takes, all the familiar things, Christmas trees, ornaments, gingerbread men, so on, but then it kind of adds a sinister presence to it, and that just made the entire film interesting to look at while being pretty atmospheric and engrossing. And I was taken aback by how ambitious it could be too with some of the set pieces. You presume that Krampus is just going to be terrifying the family, this one house, but nah, Krampus apparently takes out an entire neighborhood. You don't see it happen, but when they're like going through the snow-covered roads, and you see some of the aftermath, and it's some pretty chilling imagery that I just thought was really cool. Even though it's a relatively low-budgeted movie, modest for horror standards, like 15 million, it looks a lot more lavish, in my opinion. So I think that's really all I have to say. It was a lot of fun. Like I said, it could have been funnier, it could have been scarier, but it still satisfied me in those areas. And it's just so unique and different from everything else. In the horror genre, every horror movie has to resemble every other horror movie ever made. It gets really caught up in these trends. So for Krampus to do something totally different while also being good just makes it stand out so much more and appeal to me so much more. I also really liked the ending. It's funny because it takes two different cliched endings that we've seen many times before, combines them, and somehow ends up being better for it. It makes it work. It's almost creative in its use of uncreative tropes. So yeah, I think you should watch this movie, especially if you're into horror. It's a fun time. If you want to read my written review, you can find that in the Show Me More section below. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. This video ended up going a little longer than I had anticipated, but I enjoy talking about Krampus, I guess. So yeah, like I said, go see the movie. It deserves to be a hit. And so the director, Michael Dougherty, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, he needs to make more horror movies. Next he can do like a Easter themed horror film or a Thanksgiving themed horror film. I think I've seen too many bad examples of that for me to really want to see another Thanksgiving themed horror film, but go for it. Just don't make Thanksgiving. Gotta stop fucking doing that. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I shall see you guys later.